Welcome to another episode of the Girl About the Globe podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by a fellow solo traveller, Afarin Bellisario, to talk about teaching and solo travelling in China. If you've ever wanted to go to China, this episode is for you. Stay tuned. Welcome to Girl About the Globe, a podcast for you, the solo female traveller, empowering women to travel solo with maximum adventure, minimum impact. Welcome to another episode of the Girl About the Globe podcast. Today I'm joined by Afarin Bellisario, author of the book Silence Whispers, and a fellow solo traveller who's joining me today to talk all about travelling to China. Hi Afarin. I know that you came on a previous podcast and you were talking about Iran and also your new amazing book, but you've come back to join me to talk about your time in China. But before we transport ourselves to China, tell us where your love of travel first began.
I have no idea. Even as a child, I liked to imagine things. My parents like to travel. I always have this wanderlust. So, give me a ticket and I'll go anywhere. But I love to travel. I love to explore. And I have traveled a lot with my family, husband. But somehow I also like to travel by myself a lot of times because it's kind of fun, just to explore things on your own, see it with your own eyes only.
Definitely. So what drew you to China? Because China is a very unusual destination to go to.
Yes, especially when I went there, it was late 1980s. And, I went back to China after that for work, but this was, I applied. I mean, I always was fascinated. This is a fascinating country. It's vast. In some sense, it is diverse, although we always think about China's picture as like, the same sort of people, but it's not true. When you travel around the country, you see people who are speaking different language, maybe Turkic languages. Some, are very tall. Some are, different kinds of faces and shapes and everything else. So it always had fascinated me because of their long history, 7,000 years of history. But I had a chance to travel there, and it was at the time when traveling to China was not as prevalent as it became later. And so I had a grant to teach in a university in China, Hefei Technology Institute, and so I went to teach. It was amazing being in China.
It's quite a popular thing to do nowadays as well for people who get their teaching English as a foreign language certificate, is to
Yes.
go and to teach in Asia, like
Yes.
South Korea or China. What do you think is China's appeal for women travelers, especially women being there alone?
Well, I mean, I think that there's fascination with the culture, and certainly it's still is it's a changing tradition. It's a country where women at some point in the past were subjugated, very much so. They have to bond their feet to be. I mean, even in some sections, still you see older women who have their feet this big, and because they were all born and they can't even walk. And then you also see women in the positions of the power. Still, there's a lot of still you don't see any a woman premier in a very, very high position in the Communist Party. But they're getting there, and there's a lot of still fighting for it. And the other thing that was very interesting to me, I was teaching electronics. I was teaching computer networking and things like that. So I wasn't teaching English. But the other thing is that other women were still very much helping women. So there's always this unknown camaraderie. You may not even know the language, which I didn't. But there's this feeling of helping someone else, in need, a woman helping woman. So those are the fascination. Of course, the culture is very, very interesting, especially if you have a chance to get away from, big cities like Beijing and Shanghai. I love Shanghai, it's a beautiful city, but at the same time, a lot of smaller cities, older cities. And it's unfortunate because there is a movement, for example, to get rid of all older housing stocks and older
Oh,
homes, and building this very high skyscrapers, and encouraging people to live in them, which in some sense is nice because it has a lot of amenities. At the same time, it is very different from traditional Chinese society. Even when I was there, you could see the differences between old and new, but maybe less so these days.
how long were you there for?
I was there for 6 months, and I traveled a bit. And the other thing that I highly recommend, that I don't know what the situation is traveling on. I've traveled on Yangtze River from a part of country to back to Shanghai, and that was really interesting because you see different parts of the country. So that's also was very, very interesting culturally. It is a safe country for women. It's a safe country in general for tourists, as long as you stay away from, of course, the politics. And I'm sure many of your travelers understand that. And you follow the rules, and you're okay. You'll be okay.
You mentioned about going along the river. Were there other favorite things that you liked to do in China when you were there?
I loved Shanghai. Shanghai has a lot of little places where, sort of a nice mixture of East and West, and that's part of my appeal to me. They it's westernized, but it's also there's still a lot of feeling of the Eastern, and there are parts of it which are very touristy, like Yu Garden in the old marketplace. But there are other parts that are a bit less. And if you're an adventurous traveler, which I am, which many of your people could be, and it's nice to go off the beaten path if you can a little bit, and explore more traditional parts of China.
I guess that's where the hidden gems are. Is it in the more traditional little villages?
Yes, yes, or older towns. Yes, yes. So, but certainly these are favorite parts.
And where would you recommend for a solo traveler to go? So, say if someone only has a 2 week itinerary.
Well, there are check marks that you have to hit. I mean, obviously, you have to go to Beijing, you have to go to Shanghai. These days, of course, you have this fast trains, which I highly recommend. I took them back in, I don't know, I think 2005, and they are fantastic. They take for 2 seconds to go from the route that it used to take me like 11 hours in a train, it's now like less than 2 hours. So it's
Amazing.
fascinating that the fast trains have made it travel. But certainly go to Xi'an, which is where the Terracotta Army is, and that's a really great sight to see. Um, the old part of Beijing is there are some old housing and the old part of the city that they have renovated, and it's sort of like a showcase, but certainly it's very interesting to see. So those will be the places to see, places to be. But I also highly recommend, and again, I don't know what the situation is these days about traveling on the Yangtze River, but that certainly was highlight of my stay in China, and certainly will be something because you see a lot of different cultural changes, people changes, all in a span of, maybe a week on the river. Uh, so that would be my recommendation, if you will.
No, it sounds fascinating. I've only been to Beijing, Shanghai, and Xi'an, but
Yes,
China's huge, isn't it? So it's great that you also mentioned about taking the trains. I think they're bullet trains, aren't they? The really
yes,
fast ones, because that is definitely a good way to get around.
yes.
What did you find yourself doing in the evenings when you were there?
Well, I mean, you can go. I mean, there's no restrictions in women go out, so I would recommend go out and have a meal. Chinese people, they're good restaurants. There are wonderful cuisines all around the country. Another city that I found fascinating is Chongqing, which is where there's a artist colony still. It's today is a very modern city. It's old skyscraper, but it's an old city, and it's right on Yangtze. So if you're taking the boat from there, it's a good place. But you can go out to dinner. I don't know that there is a outside of perhaps Shanghai and Beijing. I don't know there's a lot of nightlife, sort of like clubs or whatever. But certainly, there's small. I mean, restaurants are plentiful, and especially if you are adventurous and can eat anything, you can go to a restaurant without an English menu. That would be really really fantastic, because again, because the country is so old and so varied that food is very varied, from
Mm.
north to south, from east to west. It's all different kinds of cuisine. So it's adventurous to try them.
And I grew up in England, and there are a lot of Chinese restaurants in England, but it wasn't until I went to China that I realized actually the Chinese restaurants in England don't taste anything like the
Yes,
Chinese that you get in China. It
yes, yes,
it it's just got a different taste to it, and you get the Chinese hot pot as well, don't you? That's
yes,
quite a
yes,
famous
yes,
dish.
yes, yes, yes. And I remember back in like 2000 something, I was back in Hong Kong this time. I went back to China and Hong Kong a few times in my lifetime. And we went to this restaurant. It was on the second floor, had no signs or whatever. And I was with a gentleman from that part of the world, and he was ordering. I mean, he basically didn't order no menu, and it was fantastic. It was, we had this chicken in the like a ceramic pot, which was out of this world. But as you said it's no, Americans the same way. Chinese restaurants here is very different than what you get in China.
And they love karaoke, don't they? I remember
Yes,
I trekked the Great Wall of China, and I remember staying in a couple of little really quiet villages, or what seemed to be really quiet villages. And then at night time, you can hear people on a microphone singing karaoke, and you can't see where they are, but you can just hear them singing an Elvis song or something. So that, that's really
yes,
interesting.
yes, yes, yes. There certainly is that part of Chinese culture that's sort of expressive, and that's a little new, because traditional Chinese is much more subdued. But yes,
Okay.
certainly, yes. Well, I think especially for women, they're not. But young Chinese, of course, are very different, very westernized.
That's true, yeah. And did you find it easy to meet others, especially not being able to speak Chinese or Mandarin? So,
Um, It's when I first went to China in '87, actually it was not, it was everybody was very eager to speak with a foreigner. So people who knew a little bit of English, they would come and speak with me. I found that that's changing, unfortunately, that more young, of course, in the work environment, you do meet with them, you talk to them, but I think that people have become very a bit more circumspect, if you will. So it's not as easy as back in the days to meet Chinese. And again, language is, even though English speaking and English teaching is very much valued in China today, but still is a little bit of a it's harder, because of people are not sure who you are, and that kind of thing. And again, that's my experience. Yours or somebody else's might be different.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that you would avoid in the country?
Avoid politics.
Yeah, like you said earlier.
Avoid to say anything good or bad about anybody. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Me
Avoid
too.
politics.
And what would you say to someone who's looking to go to China alone for the first time and they're unsure about it?
I would say that it's try to. I don't know whether or not there are opportunities to work, if possible. Go through some kind of a work kind of thing, so you're not landing in a hotel. Because you will end up just going and seeing the sites that everybody else had seen it. So, if possible, find yourself some kind of a I don't know, mission or whatever. If you are in university, try to see if you can get like at least a speaking arrangements or exchange or whatever. So that would be to me, it would be the best. But if that's not possible, still go and do the big three, that, as you said it, if possible, go and do a little bit more in lesser known cities.
Good advice. And if you had to describe China in 3 words, what would they be?
Vast.
One.
Vast and varied. Just avoid your old preconceived notions about China. Just go with open eyes. It's totally different.
That's true. And before we start wrapping up, is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, it's no. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your
Yes.
time. And where can people go to find out more about you, and also if they're interested in your new book as well?
Oh, people can go to the book's webpage. It's called silencedwhispers.com. Silencedwhispers.com. It's for sale on Amazon. They can go on Amazon and buy the book on Kindle, on regular Barnes and Noble in America, and of course, downloads everywhere in the world.
Fantastic. And I put a link to the previous podcast interview where you're
Yes.
speaking about Iran in your book as well, so that people can
Yes,
find
yes.
you a bit easier.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
great. Thank you so much for enlightening us about China, Afarin.
Thank you.
And
Just my view. I'm sure that there are lots more advice and expertise, but that was just my 2 pennies to it.
no, it's great. Thank you so much. And I wish you every success in the future.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you can find out more about Afarin at her website, www.afarin.net. There's also a guide on solo travel to China on the Girl About the Globe blog. That's it for the end of the season. Thank you so much for listening to all the interview podcasts that I've done for this particular season. I hope you've enjoyed them. Don't forget to download the Solo Travel Card app. All you need to do is go to the Google Play Store or the App Store and search for Girl About the Globe. It's free to download and it's an exclusive discount app for solo female travellers. Have a wonderful summer if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, a wonderful winter in the Southern Hemisphere, and I'll be back in a few months with the next season of the Girl About the Globe podcast. In the meantime, there are plenty of episodes that you can listen to get you inspired and empowered to solo travel. As always, safe travels. Thanks for listening to our Girl About the Globe podcast, making solo travel easier for you. Find everything that you need for your solo travels at girlabouttheglobe.com, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.